Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live on air or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, or on our own award-winning WHPC app. You know, you can go on your phone and hit podcast and just type in Herbally Yours, and you will get a little picture that says 90.3 WHPC, and then you can actually add that to your ongoing podcast list. In fact, we love when you do that, and people have been doing that all over the world. This show has actually been on air since 1990, and now we have evolved also into a podcast as well as a radio show. So thank you so much. We love to have you listen. Today, our guest is Cindy Perlin, and Cindy is a licensed clinical social worker, certified biofeedback practitioner, chronic pain survivor, and founder and CEO of the Alternative Pain Treatment Directory. She is also the author of The Truth About Chronic Pain Treatments and the Best and Worst Strategies for Becoming Pain-Free. So we're so happy to have Cindy on our air today, and thank you so much for joining us, Cindy.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let me tell you also, I myself have written over 16 books, and one of them is called Arthritis, the Alternative Medicine Definitive Guide. And also we have one on supplements for pain. So we've been talking about natural therapeutics to help people with pain for many, many decades, and I'm so interested in hearing about your story. Tell us a little bit, going back in time, how you got interested in the treatment of chronic pain.
Well, like a lot of healthcare practitioners, I had my own experience with chronic pain, and it was actually 45 years ago. I'm 70 now, and when I was 25, I hurt my back running, and none of the doctors seemed to be able to figure out what was wrong with me or how to fix it. I kept going downhill. The drugs didn't work, and I got to the point where I could barely function for 3.5 years. None of the doctors knew what to do with me. They told me I'd likely be like that for the rest of my life, which no one wants to hear in their 20s. And I accidentally stumbled on a book. It was called Anatomy of an Illness by Norman Cousins. And he was somebody who had a progressive crippling joint disease, and they told him that he'd just get worse and worse until he died. And he didn't like that prognosis, so he did his own research. Basically, it was a mind-body approach to pain, where he laughed his way to better health. And he mentioned biofeedback also. At the time, I was watching the Holocaust miniseries and reading books about World War II, and had no idea that what I put in my mind was affecting my body. So I started putting better, more uplifting things in my mind. And I went for a few biofeedback sessions, and that completely turned my pain around. I was able to get better and get back to work. And I dropped out of graduate school. At the time, I was able to get back to school, finish my social work degree, and get my life going again. But then I had foot trouble. I had foot surgery for bone spur, and then my foot got progressively more painful. And I could barely walk for 14 years. None of the things I'd learned that helped my back helped my foot. Again, I stumbled upon something called Rolfing, which is a very deep body work, because it turned out the problem was structural and not mental. When I was healing from my surgery, which was on my big toe joint, I was walking on the side of my foot, and my foot just got all the muscles and ligaments and everything, and my foot just got shortened to the point where when I tried to put my foot down normally, it was very, very painful. So that taught me there's a lot of different ways to approach chronic pain. It depends on what the problem is. You have to get to the root of the problem and address it to feel better. And so, I went along my merry way. I eventually started a practice specializing in people with chronic pain and chronic illness. And when I saw what was happening with the opioid epidemic and how many people were dying from their pain treatment,
Okay,
I decided...
wait 1 second there. That's a lot of information, and we will go there. So actually what you shared with us is that a lot of what piqued your interest in this topic was personal experience, which is so often the case, combined with the fact that you are a professional, you're a licensed professional, and then you thought that might be good to reach into that population that actually you could understand and help because, like, you've been there, which is a wonderful, wonderful idea. And then because of your interest in chronic pain and ongoing theories of chronic pain treatment, of course, we're in the midst still of a discussion about opioids. So what is up with opioids? Because one thing is they certainly do work in terms of helping with chronic pain?
Well, that's kind of disputable. I just wrote a blog this week for my website, the Alternative Pain Treatment Directory, about post-surgical pain management. And it turns out that opioids are actually less effective post-surgically than ibuprofen or Tylenol. And there's now dozens of research studies that show that. And then I also talk about people that I know who didn't use anything. My marketing manager had a cesarean birth, and then a few months later, she had brain surgery. And beyond whatever they gave her in the hospital, she came home and she didn't use anything. And she's somebody who just has a real can-do attitude. She told me that after the cesarean was planned, she said, "I'll be right back to work, don't worry." And prior to her brain surgery, she said the same thing to me. I'll be fine, no big deal. So I think that the way that people approach pain, what their beliefs are about it, makes a huge difference.
That is certainly true, too. But the opioid, of course, issue really did make big news. So many people have heard about that as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues is, even if it's helpful, it's so highly addictive. And when we look at the stories of the pharmaceutical industry, purposefully, they opened addiction treatment centers at the same time as releasing opioids into the world.
Right. There are actually internal memos at Purdue Pharmaceuticals, the company that started the whole thing. They were saying, well, we're going to create a lot of addicts, so we should create an addiction treatment drug. So they were very well aware of this, and they spread the falsehood that if someone was in chronic pain, it's extremely rare for them to get addicted. They said less than 1%. And unfortunately, they said it so often that there are still many people out there, particularly pain patients, who just insist that that's the case. The National Institute for Drug Abuse says that 10 to 12% of people prescribed opioids get addicted. I was just looking at the statistics. 143 million prescriptions for opioids were written in 2020, long after we knew what a problem it was. A lot of those people are getting addicted. And some people battle addiction for 20 years before they come through. And even then, sometimes they relapse. So we're dealing with a whole cohort of people starting, 20 years ago or more, who are still battling that addiction and creating new ones every day.
In your book, The Truth About Chronic Pain Treatments, I imagine you share some of that information as well.
Yes. I mean, that book was published a few years back. So the website is where you'd find the most current information about all of that. But, even back then, it was escalating rapidly in spite of government agencies trying to find ways to curtail the epidemic. Even when, publicly the U.S. government was saying this is a real problem, the FDA was approving even more powerful opioids for prescription use.
That's so amazing. I do want
and
to tell our listeners that your website is paintreatmentdirectory.com. Is that the best website to find a lot of the information you share?
Yes, it's very current. I put in new information at least once a week. As I said, the most recent article was about post-surgical pain treatment. I also recently wrote an updated article about marijuana as an alternative to opioids, and kratom, which is a Southeast Asian herb, as an alternative to opioids. Both of those things, the federal government is still engaged in trying to restrict access.
That's true. So in terms of cannabis, and I am actually on the education committee of the American Cannabis Nurses Association. And also, I was a cannabis growers in the 1960s. So
wow.
I'm very well familiar with cannabis, for sure. And of course, as you're talking about now, the fact that we're even discussing it. And there are many states where you can get a medical license. In fact, my daughter has a medical license and needs it for chronic pain. And it's amazing. So right through, however, it's expensive because you have to pay all kinds of fees to the doctors. None of that is covered under medical insurance. But at least you can get it so you know you have a small amount in your house and the cops can't come in and arrest you for it. So it's really helpful to have that license.
Yeah, we're making a lot of progress with that, but the lack of coverage is a really big deal. I just read that Biden proposed switching scheduling from Schedule 1, which is illegal, drug highly likely to be abused with no known medical benefit, to a Schedule 3, which is available by prescription. If they could do even that, that would change things. So, we'll have to see how that works. It's the Department of Health and Human Services that just proposed to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, that they do that, and we'll see how that unfolds. But, whatever you say about marijuana, the one thing that, definitely makes it so much better than opioids is no one in the 5,000 years of known history of the use of marijuana has ever died from an overdose.
That's true. And even the amount that it might be addictive is questionable. I would say it is psychologically addictive to some individuals.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you have a psychological vulnerability to addiction, that can happen. But if you stop using marijuana, you don't have the horrific withdrawal that you have with opioids. And that's what really traps people into opioid addiction, is going off of it, particularly abruptly, is so awful that people are, they just will do anything to get another fix. Right. Because they feel so sick when they go off of it. And that's where kratom can be really helpful. I'd interviewed one guy who was addicted. He got addicted after being given opioids after hand surgery. And he watched several of his friends die of overdoses, and he lost everything himself. And he just couldn't stop using opioids. And then a friend of his sent him some information about kratom. And from his first dose of kratom, he was able to stop using the opioids.
Well, let me just reintroduce you here, and then let's talk about kratom a little bit. So, listeners, you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live online at nccradio.org or any podcast venue of your choice. And for more information on today's guest or topic, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu or directly to me at naturalnurse.com. And today, our guest is Cindy Perlin, a licensed clinical social worker, certified biofeedback practitioner, and chronic pain survivor herself, and founder and CEO of the Alternative Pain Treatment Directory. And you can find more about all of her work at paintreatmentdirectory.com. And thank you so much for being our guest today, Cindy. You're really giving some great information. Now, you brought up a plant medicine, an herbal medicine, that maybe some of our listeners have never heard about before, and that is kratom. let's share more information about kratom.
Kratom has been used for centuries in Southeast Asia for pain relief, for sleep, for anxiety reduction. It's very, very helpful for opioid withdrawal, as I just mentioned. And most of it is grown in Indonesia. And the FDA has been doing everything it possibly can to try to make it illegal and unavailable. So they tried to ban it. They tried to put it on Schedule 1. That didn't work. Congress intervened. So they actually went to Indonesia and tried to get Indonesia to ban its export. And Indonesia considered it, delayed it. They have some restrictions on it now. Then the FDA went to the World Health Organization and asked them to ban it internationally. And the World Health Organization reviewed all the data. They had 80,000 comments from people about banning it internationally. And they decided there was nothing there, that there was no issue of concern. They would continue to monitor it, but they refused the FDA's request. Now the FDA is seizing some shipments of kratom.
They are, and they're raiding, I know personally, they're raiding some of these vape shops and smoke shops that sell it.
And, you know, when you are buying kratom, there are a few states that are where it's illegal. I know Alabama and Vermont are two of them. I can't remember. There's about 6 states. The rest of the country, it's legal. And you do want to be careful about quality, because there's a lot of kratom out there that's not high quality, that might be contaminated. So you don't want to buy it at a smoke shop or something like that. There's an American Kratom Association, and they vet companies for purity and standardization in terms of quality, and they have certified some brands that are safe to buy. I have some of those. I have products on my website besides the blogs, and I have probably about 5 blogs about kratom. There's also products, so there's a few vetted kratom products people could purchase online. And there's also providers listed who provide alternative medicine for pain treatment. So a lot of resources there.
That's really helpful. And you obviously went through chronic pain several times in your life.
Right.
You know, what happens when people are under that kind of pressure with chronic pain?
Well, it's an unpleasant experience that people want to get away from, which is why taking a pill is so compelling. You know, it seems like an easy answer. So people will take pills, and sometimes, you know, without regard to possible negative consequences, because they're so motivated to get away from pain. And, you know, I can tell you that when I was getting over my back issue, I was very motivated. I mean, I would do anything, except the pills didn't work for me. I think I was lucky. Less than 50% of people who are prescribed opioids get relief from them, or the side effects are so terrible that they don't continue taking them. So I was in that 50% that it just didn't do anything for me. So I had to look for other ways. And when I learned about biofeedback, I did it every single day for like a year and a half. I started doing exercises to get back in shape after, you know, not doing anything for a really long time, and to strengthen my back. I took up lap swimming, because swimming's really good if you have back problems. So that was my way of working on not having any pain, because the pills didn't work for me. And the thing about pills is they will never solve the problem. They were only temporarily suppress the symptom. So to get rid of pain, you really have to get at what's causing it. And, you know, I mentioned in my own experience 2 big things. One was, you know, the mind-body aspect of it. I was so stressed that I was exacerbating the pain and not getting better. And then there was the structural problem when I had my foot surgery. Other reasons for chronic pain are nutritional deficiencies. That is a really big one. There's being too sedentary, having a pro-inflammatory diet. There's a lot of things that can set off pain. Another thing is what they call central sensitization, where the brain gets used to sending pain signals and it thinks you need them. And even the pain signals are supposed to be to caution you to protect the area that's damaged. But the brain can continue to send pain signals long after the tissue is healed. It just becomes overstimulated, oversensitized. And there are now different ways to get away from or to change your brain so that it stops doing that.
Right. One of the things that's used to interrupt that cycle are units called TENS, transcutaneous electroneurostimulators. But just like you said, bringing all those things into play, which doesn't seem to go on in conventional medicine. You're just giving a script, end of story.
Right. So, the TENS unit is a very temporary cure too. My favorite things for turning off brain sensitization is I do neurofeedback in my practice, which is biofeedback of the brain. And you put sensors on the scalp that measure your brain activity. And then you basically reward the brain for calming down. So I use movies. The movies change the way they play. They play more pleasantly when the brain is doing the right thing, and not pleasantly when the brain is veering off course. And over time, with a bunch of sessions, you can actually change the way your brain works. You can stop the neurofeedback and your brain will continue to work better. So, that's one way. There's also a therapy that's not widely available called CalMare scrambler therapy. That's CalMare scrambler therapy. And what that is they put electrodes near the area of pain and they send a different signal to your brain, what they call a no pain signal, that overrides the brain's pain signal. And over a period of 10 sessions in about 2 weeks, people who have suffered sometimes for decades from neuropathic pain, the pain will just stop.
Now, to find somebody who would do that, because that wouldn't be usually a normal physician that someone might be going to, how would you find it?
It's an expensive device. There's not a lot of physicians who offer it. In my area, there's a physical therapist. She's a licensed physical therapist and licensed massage therapist who does it. She's gotten trained in it and bought the device. So, it may not be an MD. I'm trying to think. So her name is Laura Brown, and she's in the Albany, New York area. There's a Dr. Michael Cooney, who's in New Jersey. I think it's Ridgefield, New Jersey, who does it. I know there's a few providers in California.
So that's something for someone like I would try, let's say, eating an anti-inflammatory diet and things like that first. But when all else doesn't work, that sounds like a great addition.
I know that Dr. Cooney has people come from all over the world. And it's a pretty enduring relief. Sometimes people don't ever have to come back. The way they tell if it's working, you could tell in the first session or two, the pain stops during the session if it's going to work. So very early on whether it's worth investing in the whole 10 sessions or so or not. And it's just amazing. And what's really too bad is that it's not widely available and, of course, not covered by insurance.
Right. Well, none of these things, just about none of them are. It's true. But something like looking at what you brought up, using food that is non-inflammatory. And there are huge amounts of non-inflammatory food, but also you might need to have a test so you see which you react to in terms of an individual IgM test where you're looking at what are you reacting to in terms of your foods? And that doesn't cost really much. The test you might have to pay for, but changing your diet is just free. You just do it on your own.
Right. And there's certain supplements that are really critical and inexpensive. For instance, vitamin D. 42% of the American population is deficient in vitamin D. And vitamin D deficiency can cause widespread pain.
It's true. And unfortunately, Medicare no longer covers having a vitamin D test.
Yeah, which is just outrageous.
Crazy. Yeah.
I mean, because vitamin D is not only important for pain, it's important for just about every function in your body, including the functioning of your immune system. Early on in the COVID epidemic, there were studies coming out saying that the people who were vitamin D deficient were the ones who were hardest hit by COVID and more likely to die. And it's such an easy thing. I mean, vitamin D supplements are really cheap and widely available, but, they were censoring information like that so that people didn't know about it. And it just shows how our federal government at this moment is not working on advancing public health. They're working on advancing the interests of the pharmaceutical companies.
I have to 100% agree with you. And we've had several guests on really talking about the statistics that support that. So it's unfortunate. But certainly vitamin D, you can get tested on your own. If your insurance company won't pay for the test, anyone can walk into any lab now without a prescription and just say, I'd like a vitamin D test. And they usually have a very reasonable rate, like $30 or something, that you just pay and have it done on your own. It's a very important number to know.
One of the things on my website is what I call inspirational stories. And one of them is about a woman who was in terrible chronic pain for 11 years and went to all kinds of doctors. And finally, after 11 years, somebody tested her for her vitamin D levels and found she was severely deficient. And she got on vitamin D and she was better.
Wow, isn't that amazing? Well, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. And I invite our listeners to visit your website at paintreatmentdirectory.com. We have been talking to Cindy Perlin, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Cindy.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.